Hello, I'm Elaine Smith, the Artistic Director of the Clamour Theater Company. We're holding these creative conversations with playwrights, with actors, with directors, so that you can find out more about Clamour Theater and about the artists who work with us. Welcome to this edition of a Clamour Creative Conversation. Today, we are talking with Bob Stewart, a playwright who was with us for Clay and Water 2019, our first annual Playwrights Retreat. Welcome, Bob, and thank you for joining us.
Hey there, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. I just got my second shot, and it wasn't bad at all.
Great. That is so great. There's light at the end of this tunnel. So please tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, your bio, where you come from, where you are now.
My military brat family settled in Georgia. For some magical reason, I got accepted to North Carolina School of the Arts. I got into a accelerated drama program in 11th grade and beat all these students out in Georgia. And they sent us to a summer program when all I did was theater. If you were English, all you did was English. If you were math, and you had to compete, county level, state level, and somehow I got there, which changed my life because North Carolina School of the Arts came down and farmed us. Like, look what we have. They even brought a set model down. They were like, woo. My parents were middle class broke, but my folks divorced. Right after that moment, I'm the youngest of about seven, family of 7. And suddenly I could get grants, and suddenly I got accepted. Oddly enough, I was accepted in dance. I had just started dancing as a young man, and later I got my equity card as a junior in college doing Little Abner with Joe Namath. I did Damn Yankees with Dick Van Dyke the following summer, which was real great learning experience to watch someone like that work every night. Came up to New York and struggled and then got a house managing job. I worked on the original Vampire Lesbians of Sodom that Charles Busch wrote. I was their house manager and watched it 8 shows a week, twice on matinee days, because the Provincetown has no lobby. You're stuck right inside. But I also got to watch them work. You really get to watch a professional long run, which is a really, you separate the wheat from the chaff. You know that Elaine Smith, she does the same performance every performance I see, but that Bob Stewart just changes things up. So right after I did that, and in meeting them, I got to know them. And then when we did a play called Get You Go Psychotic, that Charles had written that he was going to do in a club after we would do our shows. He changed it to Psycho Beach Party. I got to AD Psycho Beach Party, and then it ran down the street for a while. As that started to fold, I got a gig in a small little play running off Broadway called Driving Miss Daisy. No one's really heard of it. And that was another whole level to see Morgan Freeman and Dana. I didn't see Dana. I saw Dana Abbey, but I saw Frances Turnhagen was in when I saw it. And actually sort of, they would mentor us. If you came and sat in their dressing room, they'd talk to you for hours, and it was, it was a history lesson. And then Earl Hyman came in after, and then Arthur French and all these incredible actors, Rochelle Oliver, just an amazing group of actors that would regale you with stories from the original Actors Studio. But at the time I started, I was a director. I was going to be a choreographer director, and I kept getting lousy scripts. I kept thinking I can write better than this. And so I wrote my first one-man show, G's in a Beehive, that I thought I could do this on my back. I can carry all my props, and then don't rely on anybody. But then in the process, within 3 years, I wrote 3 plays called The Marriage Variations, a memory play, American Inheritance, and All You Could Eat, which were all sort of had the same sort of characters in it. Completed that, and a lot of rewrites, a lot of hearing it back. I also wrote a piece for a friend of mine, Freddie Walker Brown, and another friend of mine named Susan Izat, who was a wonderful director, called Bone to Pick, which was a cross between Beaches and 21 Charing Cross Road. two little con artist daughters who met on a con and they stayed friends. And it all takes place in a big graveyard. So the parents come in and out of the graves, changing their clothes from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and 90s. And they just sit on gravestones and pretend they're driving their cars. And the parents never knew the girls knew. So, and of course it was a con. So the ending had to be a con, like the Sting. So, did that. And then I started joining the workshop theater with Scott Sickles, who loved my work, and within 3 years put up a memory play, and 2 years later put up Fabulous Darshan, which was a biography play about my mentor, the actor Ken Page from Cats, and he from A Misbehaving, the original cast, Oogie Boogie from A Nightmare Before Christmas. And he became sort of my mentor. I was sort of almost a gay uncle. Because when you're a young gay man, and also I was a young gay man in a city, and there was an epidemic starting called AIDS.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I didn't know anything. I had to go up and ask the most intimate questions from him. That's all I remember. So I wrote something about it. He okayed it. He saw it. He was very touched by it. That also got me hunting down producers, because I thought I had something, because I started getting standing ovations, not forgetting that it was gay. Even though no one touched each other, it had a Hindu god in it, and the choreography from the movie Showgirls was the denouement that it was that much fun. But at the end of the night, I would have people on their feet. And so I was voted top 5 of the play by the indie scene. Even when the Tonys came out, they singled my play up. If there was a play to ever get a Tony, or would be a boulevard comedy, would be Fabulous Darshan. Believing that could really happen, I met a lot of great producers. I'd go to producing seminars, and I would take you out to lunch and go, Elaine, what are you looking for? And I wouldn't shove my play at you. I would just ask you. And I was an older person. I wasn't a kid. So there was a different type of energy there. I met some Tony Award-winning producers. They said, would you like to do a spec script on the musical Woodstock? And I had a co-producer brought in. We met one of the original founders, and like all spec scripts, they implode and you write them. But when it imploded, we didn't have to write the script they wanted us to write, so we could actually write something theatrical. So maybe one event that happened to Elaine Smith, we could say, Elaine and Bob and Stephen all saw this event because they were the characters. So I had 25 actors, bare stage, play the bands. They had to play instruments. They played the kids. They played the people in the town. They played, it was almost a nonfiction retelling of this event, because the event was so amazing. A bunch of kids, it wasn't a bunch of hippies, and how they sustained themselves after the food was done after the first day. I mean, all the facts. So we started to tell a nonfiction version of it. And at the end of the play, they're back to being a bare stage. And the 25s come down stage and say, I'm 75 and I started this not-for-profit. I'm 82 and I started this not-for-profit. And you realize I was in Black Panthers, now I'm in Black Lives Matter. And they all come down stage, and come to find out, Melanie was the first time anyone lit, I think I told you this, lit.
Yeah.
Because Candles in the Rain came out of that. And so at the very end, they turn to the audience and go, what are you willing to do to join us? And they all sing Woodstock again by Crosby, Stills and Nash, and they light it. And they pull out their iPhones and they light it, and they get the audience to match it back. That's what we wrote. It was like, this is what we want to write. And then a producer friend of mine said, I'm going to do a professional reading in Patchogue. So we got 17 actors together to do 27 roles. We did a sit down 2-hour, 45-minute reading, got a standing ovation by the audience. And I was playing all the music on my iPod.
Yeah.
I was like, I've edited this, why do karaoke when we have the music? And authenticity was very important. Now that fell apart, but what happened is I met Jeff, and we started working on a passion project. He was a mad reader, and oddly enough, of gay history in New York. And so he started giving me things. So we started to write a big passion project together. And recently in October, my dear other collaborator, Freddie Walker Brown, I think I told you she played the original Joanne in Rent, opposite of Adina. Take Me for What I Am is the last song ever written. And she begged Jonathan to write it for her in Adina. And she directed a COVID little piece I wrote called Let the Chips Fall Where They May. And it was a SAG after contract.
Nice.
So these actors had to take their own cameras, film them at home, and she edited them together. And it wasn't a Zoom, it was like sort of stylized piece about what happens when you get your chip saying you're vaccinated or not. And what would happen. It had a little Shirley Jackson in it, had a little Twilight Zone, but it worked. And it was neat to get paid in the middle of COVID. You know, like we
Absolutely.
got a paying gig. I volunteer. My hobbies. I volunteer to God's Love We Deliver. I then went on to Miracle House. Both I got an award for being volunteer of the year for Miracle House. I'm not really quite sure how I got that, but and a lot of my hobbies are just writing and submitting my plays. I mean, I started to think I write 5 days a week. On the 6th day, I work with my collaborator. Like God, on the 7th day, I take a day off. I meditate a lot with my husband. He brought that into my life, and so that's what I do. And that's a little bit about me.
Great, great. So now tell us about the play that you brought to Clay and Water, Carroll of Carroll Gardens. Tell us a little bit about the plot, and then, you know, where does it stand now?
Okay, well, Carroll Gardens is about a senior loner, baby boomer curmudgeon woman who is trying to manage a very serious illness of chronic lymphatic leukemia. She's helped along by the only friend she has left because of her curmudgeonness. And also, I learned when you have cancer, you realize who your friends are. You know, when people say, oh, Bob, how was your cancer? They don't really care to hear it. They're really busy. They need to move on. They have a family and kids, and they believe they're never going to die. And as Carroll said, and but Carroll, she's helped along, but the only one left is a 20-something, very heavy-set a man who has slightly Asperger's syndrome, which I suffer from on a slight scale, that I've been trained with through therapy on how to deal with things. So it's not too bad. I can kind of put on an act when I'm terrified. But they have an adventure as they go through the cancer center together. And because Carroll, the real Carroll, loved children's books, I wanted it. She had 11 cats, and by the time she was dying, she had 3. And they were people. And so I decided to have, she had children's books and we loved them. And so I decided, I think I want the cats to narrate the play. And I said, I don't want them, recently I realized I don't want them in costumes. I want them in impeccable 3-piece suits. So they almost look like the Beatles, but they're in different colors. And they don't act like cats. They act weird, but I don't want any cat jokes. They just act, and they talk to the audience. And I decided to make the audience the other world, the side of non-life, the ancestors who watch. So I wanted to bring them in. So they felt like Pippin and Hare. You felt like it was not going to happen unless you were sitting in front of them. Like if the stage was empty, this play would not be half. If the audience was empty, this play would not be as interesting. And so Carroll doesn't pass. I want to know it's that type of play, but I thought it'd be really funny to write a play about a real pain in the ass person. But these cats also work more than Carroll because they play the oncologist who has the same disease as Carroll, which happened in real life. They play phlebotomists, they play nurses, they play Olive Garden dates, they play a comatose father, and they play the cats. The only person who gets arrested in this place is Carroll. She gets one scene when she gets to be off stage. The 3 other actors like, we hate you. You know, we're supporting. I'm like, no, you're not. You're best supporting actor. So that's what Carroll Gardens was about.
Okay, good.
And it's situated almost like a children's story. I wanted to score almost. I worked on it with the score of Kill a Mockingbird, something dark, almost in a proscenium that everything seemed almost, because it's narrated by animals.
Yeah.
You know, like Babe was narrated by pigs, and I thought, if I could tell this story in a children's, not theater, a children's literature way, and just see how that could get by. And it takes an unexpected turn. I think everyone expects Carroll to pass. And what she learns, I believe, is even much bigger than that.
Yeah.
As you know, it's the same ending. And
Yeah,
but anyway, that's Carroll Gardens.
Very good. So do you remember how you heard about the retreat? And do you think that it was worth it to come?
Oh, yes. I heard about it. I'm part of a group called the Playwrights Binge, and it was just one of the things submitted there. And I thought, well, they might like this. I don't remember what your bylines were, but I try not to send something that's out of the bylines.
Yeah.
And I remember you had a hard time finding me because I had a website that sent everything into spam. I didn't
Yes,
know
I
that.
remember that.
I know. But the best thing for me was each night we did a reading of each other's play. There were about 5 of us, but some of the best notes I ever got initially was from that audience. Some of your friends gave me notes that are still in the play. You gave phenomenal notes, sometimes off the cuff. They were so profound, I don't think you even knew they were that important. It was great because we could get in our pajamas every night and go sit in the bed and breakfast and talk. And it became, sometimes I'd go up to another room and say, you could fix your play if you made this like this. Oh, wait, here, wait, try this. Maybe combine these 2 characters. Or I could grab one of them and say, if I cut out this whole scene, would you miss this in the play? And they would go, I was thinking last night you could have cut that whole scene. Cut it. So it really was very, in a beautiful home, in a beautiful setting of that beautiful town. And there wasn't much late night. So it was really about coming back to the bed and breakfast. And I love that. And I also, since then, a lot of things have changed. I've really brought it down to really about the character Scotty and Carroll. It's really much more about them. And the cats' narrations are much more esoteric. Their approach to death is very malevolent, where Carroll is struggling to hold on to that last bit of light. I also dealt with the fact that I realized I stated what cats' purposes were for, and that's love and what they're genuinely there to do. I made the younger cat feral so that she would pay off at the end by sitting in Carol's lap.
Oh, nice.
And announced that the play was over. Thank you, because she was now, as she made up a word called Pussy King, which all the other cats say that word does not exist. She made that word up. Since then, I did readings at Broadway Con. I did it at Depot in Connecticut. I did an equity reading with Karen Ziemba, the wonderful Karen Ziemba, who was magnificent. That was incredibly informative on what to cut. Did another overhaul in November of 19, was going to do one in March. COVID happened, and then you offered, I'll do one for you. And in August, we brought some of my cast and some of Floridian cast and people from around the country. And that was an extraordinarily helpful, because that was closest to what I wanted it to be, and even made more changes. I think one of the biggest things, a friend of mine said, you have a scene of the Olive Garden when the young man's interrupted by Carroll and you realize he won't get love. And then you have a scene when you meet a nurse, I think a Muslim nurse, and the scenes are almost exactly the same. So I changed the Muslim nurse, made her faster, made her bawdier, and made her like, oh, honey, no, you want me to go to Slam? Honey, I'm married. I said, wait, hold on. See the wedding band? Oh, but you made my day. I've been married for 10 years. You're great. You're great. I'll go get your chemo and I'll be back. Bye, honey. You're great. And suddenly that's even more humiliating for Scott.
Yeah.
And it's quicker. We don't need a long, beautiful, intimate scene between this. So I learned that. Gosh, I learned things too from the gals. You had 2 friends up there that gave some of the best notes. And one said, one doctor, I had 2 doctors, a crazy doctor who was paranoid about the changing of the many administration heads, who was Carroll's oncologist. And then there was a benevolent surgeon who came in and talked with her. And then I put them together. So in the last scene, the crazy doctor got to be real and say he was quitting because his health was deteriorating and how much he would miss everything. And that was such a great note. It came from one of your friends. I think she was from Australia.
I don't remember, but I'm
okay,
glad
there
it
were
gave
2 ladies behind me who set me down and gave me some of the strongest notes. So I combined that. So he became much less of a character, and also making the last cat feral and giving her and Carroll a moment of silent negotiation. I also realized almost 5 of my scenes end in action and no words. And that's important, especially if you want to do a Zoom play.
Right.
A lot of times they don't want action. They want words. And And I've always loved the fact that the end of the scene is in silent action, important action. I remember seeing Marvin's Room, and the whole play, last 2 minutes of the play, was absolutely quiet, and it was all in action, with the mother dealing with the son she was trying to protect, and dying Marvin in the back room, and it was just so quiet, and just you just wept, you just wept for the whole thing. And so that's why I applied. It was a wonderful experience, beautiful location, smart. And you know what was loving it? It wasn't a competition.
Right.
No one sat down and said we're competing, because we were all naked at one night or the other with our readings.
Right.
And everything came from a place of, oh, I have an idea based on what you wrote. It didn't come from a dumb place like, you know what I don't like? I wish they were in kitty cat costumes. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't something like that. They were very intelligent. You had a very intelligent crowd.
Yeah.
And I also loved the place we did it in. It was quite a beautiful, beautiful town.
Yeah.
And I love that it was small. It kept us very tight.
Yeah. No, I think it worked out well. I was really pleased with that. And it was our first one. So that was great. You were all
Y'all
great.
were very nice to us.
Yes. And you were a great group.
Very nice.
So tell me now, do you have a favorite play of your own, produced or not?
Well, the one I just finished, thanks to COVID, is called New York Stories from My Uncle Elliot, Illegal, Immoral, Illicit.
Oh.
And because my friend had all these biographies, he found a autobiography of a androgyny from 1895 to 1920, and how he was a girly man. He worked for a church. He was a very feminine, high-strung, but at night he dressed as a woman. The only record in Biff Ellerson's homosexual bar called Columbia Hall, otherwise nicknamed Parasis Hall, because that's what you got when you got syphilis. There was a second floor for men who dressed up in trans, and called Circle Hermaphrodite, and that's the only record of it. So we started researching. We said, why don't we have a guy named Elliot, a narrator. We have 8 actors, and he's looking for the gay DNA. And we specifically focus on New York, and we specifically focus on men. The LGBTQIA community is too huge.
Yeah.
This is already a 275 3-hour evening, played by 4 white men of different ages and sizes, and 4 men of color of different ages and sizes. And we worked out of our way. Elliot had to be a nobody. He had to be somebody who knew Liza Minnelli's dresser, or he was somebody who was house manager for Charles Bush, or he was somebody who worked with Morgan Freeman. It was always 2 inches away. And I always said, when I moved to New York, there was a gay man across the hall who had a cravat. And he was older, much older than me, and he had been through it. And he had a black friend, who sometimes would appear in full drag. And I would see them and just say hello and, skimper out. They were so old. I think they were probably in their late 40s. They were terrifyingly old, but they were very sweet. And so I said, we had to write about what we knew as gay men, the nobodies, the Elliots. And so there's always an Elliot everywhere, from the first 1895 lecture to Circle Hermaphrodite. We even have black and white gay men in a cab trying to get up to a gay bar in Harlem, where all the gay bars were, which nobody seems to know that. We actually learned the Astor Bar and the Astor Hotel, one half of it was for gay, one half of it was straight. And the sailors and army men in the war, they say, what would you like, gentlemen? Pink lady or a martini? And whatever you answer, they will refer you to one side. The straight side, they could touch each other and laugh. The gay side couldn't. But a lot of old rich men picked up a lot of sailors. And during the war, of course, there's death during the war. So you could have a visitor one day and then get a letter back that all those cute sailor boys that were there were gone.
Yeah.
And it goes through the 50s. It was illegal till 1980. Act 1 ends with them all in 1969 police uniforms, and they reenact the entire Stonewall riot, playing everybody, including the police, the queens, the people running, the crowds, and it ends with the first Pride parade a year later. And they come out eventually in the clothes, what they look like Miss Warren, Ohio was a drag. And I learned a great deal that drag was illegal. So there were no drag queens in that bar. You could be a flame queen. You could tease your hair up and use mascara. And how many of them were homeless kids, and how they would take trash out and wrap it around them and make a costume. And I looked at RuPaul's Drag Race and realized sometimes he'll have that competition, make something out of nothing. And so we wanted, and so then Act 2 is literally all the religions and how they hated us and how they competed to hated us. And then we go through the libertine 80s, and then of course the epidemic of the libertine 70s, and then we go into the epidemic of the 80s, which is terrifying based on some early experiences of mine and Jeff's, and then the 90s, and then into 2000 with the new freedoms and LGBTQI terms, and the new progress flag was added with the brown and black stripe. And we carried it all the way up to the present. And then we had an idea to finish the play with a set of eulogies through time. And so all you have these silhouettes as someone tells a eulogy about the boy in 1907 who got himself castrated because he wanted to be a woman and he'd never been happier, but he died in that operation because it was not illegal. Or you have the African-American man who dated the white man who was part of the Talented Tenth with W.E.B. Du Bois and Langston Hughes, talk about this man who got hit by a car. Or you talk about a friend you knew in the 50s. In the 50s, by the way, in Queens, you could go to gay parties in personal homes, but you had to bring a woman. She's usually a lesbian. You had to walk in as a couple because the cops were watching. In the 50s, your neighbors could turn you in.
Oh.
So you had to leave a bar separately, meet at a stand, give a note, go to your home. It was just this amazing, complex ritual. And sometimes we have a scene when they just invite you in to tell you where to go. Like, darling, let me tell you, Leonard Bernstein, Truman Capote, they're all on my team, and I work in advertising, and, oh no, I don't want to have sex with you. I want to tell you where to go because you look kind of stupid, and always, there's always someone named Elliot. And that was, and we even have the chorus boards of Anything Goes being blackmailed by a stage manager, a straight stage man. Cole Porter liked his choruses gay.
Okay.
FYI. He was notorious for driving up to Harlem with his friend Sheridan, the actor who played Sheridan Whiteside in Man Who Came to Dinner.
That Monty Woolley?
Yes, Monty Woolley. By the way, he stopped talking to Monty Woolley because he found out Monty Woolley invited his black chauffeur into his bed to live with him. And that was too much for Cole.
Okay.
Process that.
Yes.
Process that, right? So I don't know where the hell we're going to do it. It's 3 hours long. We need development. We need to hear it. I mean, we're planning when it's over to we have $800. We're going to say, would you take a Saturday and Sunday to read each act around a table with us so we can just hear it?
Yeah.
Because it does run a huge gamut.
Yeah.
And we also invite the audience. We say, this is a tent pole for the LG, and it's someone looking for their gay DNA. Right. You can't swab the mouth. And so we talk about maybe the gay DNA are our stories. Yeah. And that's what sort of we say, may we invite our LGBTQI brothers up here.
Yeah. It sounds fascinating, but it is going to be a challenge to get it up.
It's the most non-commercial thing I've ever written in my life. I don't know what I was thinking, but I couldn't be more proud of it.
Well, that's great.
So
that's great. I look forward to following its journey. So what are, 3 favorite plays of yours by other writers?
Well, the last thing I saw, there's 3 of them, but the last thing I saw was a play called Slave Play by Jeremy O. Harris, which talked about race wrapped up in interracial relationships. It had a lot of stylization and 3 interracial couples dealing with a very extreme therapy and how they can't communicate. When I read the play, it was so fascinating. I read it again sitting there. When I saw it, I loved it, loved the actors. But there was about 20 minutes in the middle of it, I thought it could get removed. And I saw it again and said, there's 20 minutes. And I said, but I never felt that reading it. So I don't know why. And I feel like I'm complaining, but it's still a wonderful evening in theater, very adventurous. And that last scene will stop your heart. And it's not violent. It's just like, oh, I never thought about that. And it's a huge metaphor about how we listen to each other as different races. And it was beautiful. The other one that I loved was The Inheritance by Matthew Lopez. It was done in London. My writer mate saw it. It was 2 evenings like Angels, and it was based on Howard's End. It was an all gay production, a white plate, everyone barefoot, no props. And it was sort of them trying to write. And then the real Forrester comes out and tells them, I was gay, but didn't get your luxuries. And they start telling a gay version of Howard's End. You know, the rich man's a rich gay man with sons. And it was 3 hours and 3 hours before and later. And he said it was really remarkable. It came to New York and failed. And, you know, I tell people this, gay plays rarely recoup. And the only play that maybe recouped was Torch Song, maybe, but Angels in America did not recoup. It recouped in the subsidiary rights. All these quote, I believe one theater company was looking for plays from around the world, which I loved, but they started with, if I saw another gay play with white people on stage, I was going to scream. And I wrote them a firm letter saying, first of all, that's bigotry. Second of all, you know how hard it takes to get anything mounted that has any homosexuals in it. And second of all, you're 12. Do your history. And these are the plays that didn't make money. I realized they took that off their page. And I fully think it's great to get plays from Ethiopia and Iran and Iraq that are gay. And that mission statement's beautiful. But I thought, don't start with that. You know, now you have ageism. Is that what you want to talk about too? And that's one reason why we did Uncle Elliot, is that there was always some old gay person who told you a story from a long time ago that you were just sort of like, what? You know, and they would tell you about the legal bars and everything and how they were shut down or in jail. Did you know when you were arrested in anytime, they would arrest you, put your name, phone number, and address in the newspaper? It just destroyed people.
Sure.
And they would always round them up in mayor time. So anyway, the last play that I loved was I'm Sorry, The Inheritance. It closed before the epidemic. It just didn't make its money, but it got a load of nominations. So I think they'll be fine. And they also gave Lopez a hard time. Mr. Lopez writing a story about a very classic piece of English literature. I've often wondered if he had based it on a piece of classic American literature, would it have been more palatable? I don't know. All I know, it was stunning and I was moved and it was beautiful. The last one was Fairview, which won the Pulitzer Prize in 2019. Never played, but in 3 tiny little off-Broadway theaters. For me, it's it looked like a black sitcom with a crazy mother in a perfect house, and she was worried, and the husband and the crazy sister, and the audience is howling. But then the daughter comes in and realizes there's people watching, and they're mostly white, and she starts feeling very self-conscious of her blackness and how to keep it a sitcom. By the way, the whole thing was funny as all get out. And also she had a great metaphor about what is expected by white audiences when they watch the Black experience. And do we fit it for the white audience so they feel better? And it was actually stunning. And it wasn't like, oh, I feel guilty for being white. It was just more she said she was living in South Africa and there were cameras on the corners of her neighborhoods. And she kept wondering, who's watching me? Will my kickball fight or my game I'm playing in the street be misconstrued as a riot? Will they send cops in?
Yeah.
So who's watching me? And I love that she won a Pulitzer. I'm sad. It's probably done in the regionals. Do you know Fairview?
I don't.
Right.
That is the great thing about this question is I'm making this long list of plays that people have recommended that I'm not aware of. So I've got a lot of reading to do.
Jackie Siblings Drury wrote it. And like I said, that first act is one of the funniest things I'd ever seen in my life. And I really recommend The Inheritance. It was beautifully done too. I only read The Inheritance. I never got to see it.
Yeah.
But it came and went so quickly. I never got to see it. But those are the three plays that I just was, one, they were very theatrical. All three of them demand the audience. And that's what I liked about them.
Good. Well, I'm putting them on my list to read. So I'm afraid we're kind of out of time, but you know, for our viewers, if you'd like to read plays by Bob Stewart, you can find them on the New Play Exchange website at newplayexchange.org. For Clamour Theater Company news and events, check out our website at clamourtheater.org or follow us on Facebook as Clamour Theater Company. And we will post all those URLs in the description below the video. And if you'd like to see more interviews like this one, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. So Bob, thank you so very much for taking the time to talk with us today and for letting our audience get to know something about you. We look forward to following your playwriting journey, and we are really glad that you are part of the Clamour community.
Well, thank you. And I hope I didn't go over 30 minutes. I was trying to look at my clock.
I think you're fine.
All right.
Thank you very much.